Oh, it's great to have you on the podcast. Our listeners are in for a treat today, having such an experienced coach with ourselves. UEFA Pro License coach now and assistant coach at the top Portuguese side, Boavista.
Yes,
Tell
yes.
us, how's the season started for you? It's been a good start.
Yeah, it's been the best start of the club in the past decade, I think, or I think it's something around that. And yeah, but it's still a short season, so we are top six right now, but with same points as Braga. We had some one defeat, two wins, one draw, but we also qualified for the League Cup. So in Portugal, so it's been interesting, been okay. And I think we all do when we start. Some of them are totally wrong that you end up changing them with time and experience, but most of them, I think I kept them. And when I arrived in Benfica, I found a group of crazy people that thought the same way as me.
Hmm.
My boss was a guy called Fonte Santa, a genius for me in terms of children football. Um, and I had this amazing group of coaches where they all share the same vision, not like a religion, but we did share the same vision and we saw working and kids developing in such a big way. And for me, once again, it was another window or door that opens with different ideas that you start blending and mixing with the you had, and suddenly you're thinking, wow, this can go to different levels. And yeah, you start thinking, questioning, trying, and yeah, and those experiences, I think that's the key thing. It's to enter in different contexts so that you challenge yourself, question yourself, and see other people working to make you, this is interesting, this is not. And
Yeah,
sometimes what was not interesting some years after, you say, this can be interesting now in this
yeah.
context. So yeah, it's a bit like that. It was a bit like that.
And this must have been very exciting for you as an individual and as a coach, as your journey developed from the grassroots game to all of a sudden now you're aligning yourself with one of the biggest Portuguese clubs out there. You know, when you were growing up as a kid, what team in Portugal did you follow?
It's That's a secret.
Ah,
No, I was a Sporting Lisbon fan when I was youth. It's funny that people ask me that, and now I don't have the. I don't. It's not because I can't, but I don't have the craziness. So I always liked football. So I remember we had this chat, me and you, many years ago, and clubs that I like. I like hundreds of clubs in England. I like so many clubs, and one of my favorite clubs is EFK Gothenburg in Sweden and things like that. So I like clubs. I like Sheffield Wednesday. It's my English club, but I like a dozen of other English clubs. So I really like the game itself. But I was a supporter of Sporting Lisbon, and it
uh-huh,
was funny because I was suddenly working in the rivals.
uh-huh,
But I think, to be honest, back then I still saw it as something really interesting that I was doing, working at a nice top club. But at the same time, I was still part time in my local grassroots club.
yeah,
And if you ask me, did you have still the ambition back then in that time to be a coach? No, because my taking education, taking my badges were basically to be more competent, doing the job, helping my players, be a better coach in what I was doing, more than thinking I want to take a step into the professional level. Because Benfica was still, like I said, even though inside Benfica, I ended up grabbing a project which was how we met, called the
mhm,
Benfica Way, which we were giving international coach educations in different countries and clubs. And then I realized that, okay, I started seeing how people work in different countries and different levels, and you start thinking, "Oh, I might continue in this career. I have the passion, and maybe an opportunity can arise." But back then, I was not really thinking of. I was never the guy obsessed about, oh, I'm going to be a head coach, I'm going to have this career, and so on. Things just happened. Until then, it was just flowing, and I would just go with the flow. Back then,
yeah,
it was like that. And
uh,
that was something that I loved in this whole experience. It was not about football, it's about understanding cultures, context. And this, when you think about this, this is really important for you as a coach
mhm,
now where I am, for example, to understand that people come from in my level right now. You work with players that it's definitely not just Portuguese people, and
mhm,
it's definitely not people from the same place. So it's like this diversity that exist in the football clubs, it's so essential that you grow up and your coaching skills and so on, also understanding the differences that places have in terms of how that can influence who you are as a football player, also not just as a person but also as a football player. That's also something that when you reflect a bit on it, it's kind of interesting, I think. He invited me after a coach education I did at the club. He invited me to join the club, and you know what? It was then that I thought, like, okay, I'm going to take this step. I was already been working only with Corver coaching and Benfica back then in that period. And then I thought, like, okay, now I'm really going to risk because I'm going to move away from my house. I'm going to go to a different city because Braga is 350 kilometers away from me, which in Portugal is totally on the other end of the country. Um, so, and it was a great challenge because I was going to be in charge of all the under 14s below, all the training programs, coaches, players, who we select, who we don't select, how we play, model of training. And that was basically grabbing your experiences, your ideas, and put them into practice and see how it works in a top level that selects good kids in the area, but also working as an individual developer, like a skills coach in one way. But I don't like to call it skills coach because your focus is on the individual development of the player in the whole dimensions, not just technique, not just this, not just that. So, and I went to be in charge of that for the under 19s, the kids with more talent. So I was in one way part of the coaching staff there and in all the youth. So with time, I spent there 3 years, and the goal was to kind of, after the first year, we kind of progressed the project we were doing, progress it to the age groups above until we have a common line in the club. That was the
Yeah.
main goal. And to be honest, it was awesome. It's like when you need to share your ideas with other people, you need to think also about them much more because you're going to be challenged, you're going to be questioned, you're going to have other people doing your ideas for you, so they will always interpret it in a different way and challenge you in a different way. So it was really it was really rich for me because I was watching. We had like I had like around 8 to 10 coaches or maybe more directly that I was responsible. That I was watching every training, every game they were doing, and that's the amount of games you see, the amount of trainings you see, the amount of kids you see, and also not just watching by watching. I was in charge of the training programs, really correcting what they were doing, questioning why, negotiating with them. Let's go more in this direction instead of that. So I think it was so interesting back then because it really made you focus on not your own team and your own players, but in a club perspective and in a long term perspective of the player development because you were in charge of that program. So what do we need? What do we miss it on the boys 19, for example, on top that were in the top level of Portuguese football? What do we miss here that we could have done it earlier on? What's missing throughout the path, and all this was quite decent reflections and really interesting periods, I think.
I mean, we've talked a good bit about the Braga projects. We want to move on now because that obviously seen you also move countries. Then your next stop was moving not just 300 kilometers away from your hometown; it was actually leaving your country and going to Norway.
Yeah, it's just a consequence of what we spoke. It's like I was in searching of more experiences because I realized that every step I would take, I was getting more complete. I'm not saying better, but more complete. It's
Mm-hmm.
like you're always looking back and think, oh, if I was doing that, if last year, if I had the chance to start that project 2 years ago, right now I would do it so much better. And this
Mm-hmm.
this idea that you develop, that you think of things in a more complex way, in a better way, or whatever, or you really take more focus into details or this and that make me understood that when you take another step, you become better. You challenge yourself. So back then I was like, I had another option, which was to continue in Braga. But to be honest, the project was was up running and in a really good way. We started having players in the national teams, players reaching the first team, and you even had a guy that Trincão, Francisco Trincão, that was in Barcelona. Now he's going to now he's in Wolverhampton. He was
Yeah.
one of the kids that went to play against your project in Belfast, for example.
Oh,
That was
wow.
in Braga. He was one of them, and it's like this. Yeah, you don't think like, oh, this is I can stay. I had the option, I can stay here forever and just enjoy the work, or you think, okay, this is done, it's part of it, but now I want more. and
Hmm.
and when I mean I want more, to be honest, back then I did have the idea I want to be a coach. That was true, and I've been working with youth for many years, and suddenly I had this possibility to go to a third division club in Scandinavia, which is an area of the globe that I was always attracted to. So because of the social balance, the balance of the countries, and I think it was interesting. At least I had been there doing coach educations, and I always liked it. So I was like, but it's different as a tourist or to live there. And that was the shock that I had in one way, because I ended up going to a club in the middle of Norway, in a very remote area, uh, and amazing place in terms of nature, but to a totally different context. But I
Hmm.
had the opportunity to be the head coach of the first team, which were in Division 3, and to be in charge of the whole youth development. So in my head, I was doing my own Barcelona with my
Yeah.
ideas. So
Amazing.
that was so exciting, you know. But
Hmm.
the reality is, nothing is exactly what you think because of the context of things and how you see it. It's like my reality in Portugal, that every club, they work to compete to try to be the. If you go to the smallest amateur club in Portugal, in their goal is to win every game and to try to go up in the divisions so that they can compete against in the Portuguese top league
Hmm.
and every level.
Hmm.
While in Scandinavia, it's totally different. You have clubs that really have a social role. That's it. And if there is a guy that becomes good and so on, send him to the other club, which is the whole district that has better coaches, better players. Put them in that context once in a while, not all the time. Don't select them too early. Give them time. Give them. It was a totally different context of Portugal. And to be
Yeah.
honest,
So,
in the beginning, oh hell, I struggled a lot
yeah.
to accept that this was okay, to accept that this was the right. And when sorry, this is not the right way, because we develop top clubs in Portugal
Hmm.
every year,
Hmm.
really good ones. And Norway, the last years, especially when I arrived there, haven't been so successful as a national team in their clubs and so on. And you were questioning everything. And
Hmm.
you know what? Today, I still think there is a lot of things that I wouldn't, I would change it. But there is a lot of things that I really think they are doing a hell of a job in both things, socially and to develop elite players. And maybe their view is not so extreme that we have in Portugal. And I think something in between of,
Hmm.
and this is the richness of it, that you end up going to experience that makes you, even the things you were against, after a year of
Yeah.
reflection, of living it, you realize maybe this is not wrong. You know what? This is interesting. There is a lot of things here that I could take back to Portugal, and I'm sure we would be better, and so
Yeah.
on. You
Yeah.
understand?
You completed your UEFA B license in Portugal, and then you
Yeah.
took your UEFA A license in Norway. I mean, tell us and the listeners the differences in terms of your learning experience of how they deliver and run their courses in each country.
I think the experience is a bit like the cultural change in terms of what I felt in coaching, how the clubs are organized. It's the same, but like it or not, UEFA is in charge of the programs, is in charge
Hmm.
of the education. So you have the content is more or less the same in
Hmm.
every country, even though there are some areas you can have more of this and remove a little bit of that. But in the end of the day, the people that teach you, they teach you with their cultural perspective, with
Yeah.
their previous experiences. And in
Hmm.
Portugal, there is a big connection between the university side, the, student side and the game side, and very into. We have, the tactical periodization became a big thing when I moved to Norway. It was all of it was into tactical periodization of teaching things in the game, and the game is the teacher, and differential learning, and all this kind of scientific terms that you can get,
Mhm.
and I did felt that in Portugal, the educational system, you have to remember we've been in a fascist regime in the past and so on. And in my time, so that is the teachers that I got, and you kind of feel a bit of that influence still, is that you are almost obliged. Is it the right word? Obliged, yeah. Or
Yeah.
forced, not forced, obviously, but you have to learn this.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, there is no right way or wrong way to do it, but here in the course, you need to know this. We're going to test you, and if you don't know it, you fail, and
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that it's sort of, you're having to get across those buzzwords that they want to hear.
Yeah, but in Portugal, it was like I was saying, the cultural difference is that people, we do it without culture. And you have to learn. We have to learn the way we think. You have to learn the way we teach our coaches. And suddenly you go to Norway, which is has a much more open perspective, which is first the game itself has these differences, the social difference. The game, the first UEFA C level in Norway, it's very focused for parents that are more they are more activity ladders. In Portugal, the UEFA C is almost a UEFA B. It's quite complete in terms of
Yeah.
what you need to learn, how to do an exercise and this and that. Really complete, really demanding in one way, according to the entry level. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
And suddenly you go to Norway where you feel like, okay. And suddenly they open a lot of doors. They make you question and think. You are allowed to think. You're allowed to have your own opinions. You're allowed to, which I also had in Portugal. Don't misunderstand me, but it was different. In Portugal, they say, this is the direction. There are more, but this is the one we choose to teach you. This is
Yeah.
how it is.
Yeah.
And in Norway, it's more like, okay, you have this, you have that, you have that. Let's talk a little bit of this. Let's talk. If you want to know about it, study more. It's
Mhm.
so relaxing and so open that
Mhm.
in one way, I start thinking like, you know what? If I didn't have learned in Portugal all these basics, all these ground things that are key, I don't know if I would develop. But at the same time, I would learn more, I would say. But at the same time, I felt that this freedom, that
Mhm.
you don't need to follow only one idea, made you open to different stimulus, to different ways of thinking. So I think it was also interesting that once again the way you teach culturally, the way you learn, the way you kind of makes you question it, and it was more open. It was more into the scientific side of the game, but not in Portugal. I have to say that the courses, even though if you ask this to many coaches, they will say, "Oh, the courses are just to get the badges." And that's what most of the people say, to be honest.
Mhm.
But if you are not a football player, if you didn't went to college, to university to learn about the physiology of effort, to learn about the games, how to teach team sport, and so on and so on, you will learn a lot. And in
Mhm.
Portugal, in my time, everything based on Carlos Queiroz, that used to be Alex Ferguson assistant coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, he was the guy, one of the guys, not the guy that developed a lot of the early days of how we teach football in Portugal, all based in principles of play. So, in terms of children football, and that was something that we preached a lot when we went to my coach education, it's not about teaching skills, it's about teaching the principles, and the skills are part of those principles. So, okay, principle of mobility, why do we, or principle of progression, I have the ball, I have space in front of me, attack that space. As a principle, the players learn to do things because, not because there is a rule, but they identify situations and they do those situations, and then they search for the best tools to succeed doing that. And that was more, we wanted to teach that instead of teaching the opposite way. Okay, this is the tools for you to solve this problem, but you are never involved in the problem, so you
Yeah.
never really use the tools. So I'm getting into a more complex way of explaining here, so I think I
Yeah.
better shut up. in that perspective.
No, I'm telling you, it's really it's intriguing because I suppose it's an enriching learning experience that you have received there, sort of seeing a different culture and a different FA and how they deliver their courses. And I mean, we look at all these top Portuguese coaches who are coaching in top level of the game. But was it Mourinho? He did a lot of his coach ed in Scotland. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah. And it was, but the main reason was because in Portugal there was a problem with the government and the Portuguese FA in terms of who would give the courses, how it was the legislation done. So the courses were closed for many years. And during that period, I also tried to go to England to do. I even did a pre-qualification for my UEFA A back then. But then, because I was in Norway, happy days, I was able to take my UEFA A in Norway, and now I finished my UEFA Pro in Portugal. So yeah, and it was nice again to jump into a different context again and to be in my country and doing it. I think that's interesting.
And then that took you to another Scandinavian country. Then your next stop was Denmark.
Yeah, then it was. I think until now it would be unfair to not say it. It's like I think it was one of the most exciting projects I've been in my life. First, because I love the city. Copenhagen is amazing, and the club really made me. If you ask me today, what is your club? I will not say Sporting Lisbon. Today I have to say Boavista because that's where I work. But to be honest, I always say it's Copenhagen. It's a club that marked me because I love the city, love the stadium, love the fans, love the feeling of the whole thing, but the atmosphere of the whole thing. But in terms of work, I saw a club that develops top players year after year after year, and that has really a club philosophy, a club language, where you don't need to be controlling people to follow a certain line of work, but where people are really dedicated and committed to work together, step by step, to develop players. And it was really a nice project that I've been. And it's a club that, to be honest, even though the facilities are decent enough, but if you compare it to top level clubs in the world that has much better facilities, much better, I think they do miracles because the players there, I worked with some really exciting players there, and some of them are going to pop up in the top European football in the next years for sure. Because
what was their formula? What made them different? What made them special?
First is like I think they really grabbed that. At least in my perspective, okay, it's all based on my eyes or my glasses. It's like they kind of were able to blend the seriosity of player development, the professionalization of it, with the social side of it at the younger ages. That's one thing. Second, I think it's the whole the way things are set up, the connection between school and the clubs as a consequence or follow up or providing time to go to the trainings or to do complementary work at schools where there is a link with the club. The selection process, it's really interesting. In Portugal, the top clubs can select the best players, period. And basically you kind of drain all the clubs around you with because you select the best ones. And it's interesting because you need the best players to play with and against each other to develop. It's true. But in Denmark, there is a gentleman's agreement with all the clubs that you only select players within your area. So you really need to develop your own players. Okay, you can buy them when they are older to each one of the clubs. You can have foreigners, which some clubs do, the top ones do. But it kind of gives a more focus on develop the ones you selected than having to think all the time, select the best one. Oh, this doesn't work out. Let's select another one to replace him. And being in that wrong spiral of we think we are developing, but we're really not helping making them better. But I also understand that if you, as a top club, you have a player that you see him in a decent level, but you can't really expect that player to reach a top level. Why keep on wasting time with him? Because that's part of the business. So he shouldn't develop there. He shouldn't develop. He should develop in a lower context. And these questions are always in the head of every academy director and every coach. But I think in in Copenhagen. It's what I said. The reflections were done together. A lot of good professionals there that I found, and people really dedicated to work together. I think to be proud in following that club language.
Hmm.
I did found that, and then the key thing I think is that in that club they really created the opportunity for the players to play an age group above, an age group below, to practice, to try themselves, to appear, give them space in the first team so that they believe in them, give them a chance. I think it was a really, really exciting project I've been.
Amazing.
And then obviously with the add-on that the city is fantastic, so it kind of it's really good.
And you were then coming back to work in the top tier of football in Portugal in the Premier Liga. Tell us your next move then.
Yeah, it was from there. I was in, like I said, I was in Copenhagen, loving it. But suddenly I had the possibility to go back to Portugal. Not that this was a goal in my head. This is interesting to. I don't really. If you'd say, oh, you were going to be in top league in Denmark or top league in Norway or whatever, I would be quite happy with that. It's not. I didn't have this ambition or goal or dream. I want to coach in the Portuguese league or. But suddenly you have the possibility to be close to your family. And to be with a person that you like, which was the assistant coach of Marco Silva back then, was going to start his career as a head coach in Portugal. And it sounded like a good project. We talked, and I took the decision that hurt me a lot in one way, but it gave me a lot of happiness afterwards of leaving Denmark. And I remember I had this conversation with my boss in Denmark, and this also shows the mentality. For example, in Portugal, it's very common if you go to a place and suddenly you leave. I'm being also unfair with the Portuguese culture because it's not like that. So I shouldn't say it like this. But it's very common sometimes you are in a place and you leave, and then people are like, okay, he left, so we don't care, we don't want him back anymore. It's not really like that, but
Mhm.
it's a bit. There is not this vision that I had from my boss in Denmark that just said, Hugo, you have the opportunity to work in top level of the Portuguese league, which is one of the best leagues in Europe,
Mhm.
and you have that opportunity. Just go. And if something goes wrong, you have a place here for you. We want you back. You will become a better coach, more experienced. So don't worry. Just go. Enjoy it.
Amazing.
Try it. It's in this kind of when I was talking to my boss saying, you know what, I don't want to leave, but I have this opportunity, but I really don't want to leave. I'm so happy here. But at
Yeah.
the same time, I want to. This is a challenge that it's interesting. It's assistant coach, senior level at the top league in Portugal. Yeah, I want to be part of this. And when after he said this word, just go. And worst case scenario, if it goes wrong, you become a better coach, and you can come back and do even a better job, which is something that it's part of that club culture too. And you know what, that gave me really the if I was thinking like, shall I go or not? Suddenly, I just decided to go. I knew some of the people I was going to work with as part of the coaching staff. I knew the head coach, even though we haven't worked together in this context of him, the leader, me, assistant, or so on. But it's a person I do admire as a person. And then when we started talking about ideas and so on, okay, similar ideas on how to approach the game, similar ideas on how to practice. Uh, yeah, and it was very easy to just enter. And then we entered in a project that just had came back to the Portuguese top level, a club called Famalicao,
Mhm.
and we did a awesome, great first season where we
Mhm.
failed Europe, a club that was expected to be fighting to avoid relegation. We finished the league in the last round with a possibility to reach Europa League place, and we failed by 1 point in the last game. We conceded a goal in the last minute, and
Goodness.
that hurts. That's the you start learning the. But we had this amazing start of the season, so it was really cool in terms of experiences playing in stadiums where you used to be a supporter watching games. Suddenly you're there, uh, playing with and against some of the top guys you've been meeting
Mhm.
players that you. And this is something really special. Meeting players, part of your team and part of your opponents that you have been part of their youth development career. Not
Oh,
this,
that's
you
lovely.
were not in charge of it at all. You're not responsible for anything, but you had a contribution. You were part of it, and that's rewarding, you know. So that was quite
Special.
quite quite special, and
Yeah.
I really liked it. And then okay, we were 2 seasons in the Famalicão. Second season didn't went so well. We end up leaving before the season ends. And then we started this year at the Boavista, which is a giant that is sleeping in the Portuguese football. It's
Mhm.
a club that in the last years, in the last decade, struggled financially, had some issues. They went down into divisions, relegated, and so on, and then they came up to the top level again. Not this year, but they have been in the Portuguese league before. And yeah, and now it's our job to make the club be a strong club in Portugal again, and that's what we are trying to do. So the season
Um,
is starting well, but there is a lot of games going on, so a
yeah,
lot of
that's
things to
amazing. And
happen. So,
I think that's how we kicked off the podcast, and it's been a
yeah.
positive start for you at the season. I mean, quickly, I don't want to press into too much detail because obviously there's only be so much you can tell us. But for the listener, we all know the most important thing with the first team. You've talked about that already, is to get the victory at the weekend. But give us somewhat a wee bit of a time scale. What do you do during the week? I know it'll vary between when the game is scheduled, but give us like a typical day at your club now,
Yeah,
Boavista.
let me put it this way. There is, like you said, there is not much you can talk because some things you really have to not talk about it. But it's not
Mm-hmm.
because it's a secret or this, but it's a typical day would be arriving, having your breakfast, starting planning the session was planned the day before. So when you arrive, you just confirm if you have your players available or not. You just recheck if everything is for the training session that you had prepared is going to move on, or if you have to change anything. You set up the training session, the pitch. You go to do your training, and then after the training, afternoons you have reviews. It depends on the day. Depends on when is your next game, previous game. You always have meetings to discuss details of how to approach the next game, or what went bad in the previous game, and this and that. So it's a lot about planning the training after, review what you've done, watching games, and in my specific case, I'm very focused into the individual side of the players, so developing the individual side, also doing a lot of individual analysis, looking at the player, almost like a zoom in one guy all the time, and then change that guy and zoom in, seeing what is done well, what is done wrong, getting statistics, getting. Obviously, you don't do this alone. It's a big staff. It's a lot of people that are working with us. So the day can be it's never the same, but it's not like people think like, oh, this is awesome, working at this level, you do your training and you go home. There is a lot of work if you want to have good results, and it's not just about the good results. In this case, is not just about winning, because winning for a team that avoids relegation means not going relegated is a win. For a team that wants Europe, achieving Europe is a win. So you don't need to win the league but achieving your goals. To achieve goals, you definitely need to work for it. Obviously, it helps a lot to have a decent team with good players, but even that takes work. You need to evaluate them. You need to see if they fit in the way that you play. So I know I'm talking very generally, but basically, Tim, it's basically you have a task in your coaching staff. All of us has its own task, and you just throughout the day keep on following it to increase the. Yeah, in the end of the day, it's about reviewing the previous game,
Mm-hmm.
preparing the next one, and the next ones based on the information you have available right now, and improving your team. Where can we be better? Where can we be better? How can we be better than the opponents? Where can we be better in our previous performance? What was the challenges that we faced that we didn't solve them? What if they happen again? How are we going to solve it? And sometimes we can use hours discussing more things like this, uh, and yeah, sometimes can be hours just discussing this. Sometimes can be hours just discussing an exercise. Sometimes can be everything done so fast because we know what we want and so on. So it's not yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
yeah,
intriguing.
it depends a lot because you have different opponents. every week. You have midweek games. You have so all this planning in terms of workload, tiredness, fatigue, and so on. It's quite it's a lot of things that you don't think of it in the youth level. A
Yeah.
lot of things that so the complexity of the work, even though you become professional, you have more time for it, and you have fully focus on this. Truth is the complexity. It's much bigger. The reward when you win in terms of achievement, it's much bigger. But I can tell you that the disappointment when you lose, it's also much bigger because you're more exposed. You're People talk about it every day. No one cares if a third division club loses a game or wins it. They do care, obviously. I'm not saying it bad in a bad way for a third division club, but
Mm.
it's like the impact of it.
Yeah.
It's much lower. But I also have to confess that the impact of it for you as a part of the coaching staff, it's much lower than if you are the front guy, the head coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so it's still a nice role to have if you want to keep on improving because you have a key work, a key task. You contribute directly in what's happening, but at the same time you're not the main face of it. So it kind of gives you some safety to keep on improving, keep on questioning things, keeping seeing things in your perspective, but also in your boss perspective. And when you have a guy that comes from different levels, good experiences, and so on, it's amazing. Which is my case that you're working with highly competent people that really makes you think, really makes you be better every day. So that's the part that I love the most. Otherwise, I didn't want it to be an assistant coach. So that's the truth.
Right. And what's the goal? What's the goal this season for Boavista? Can you make that public? Have you?
No, that I will not say. Obviously. Now, in the end of the day, it's to do better than last year. So that's we want to establish the club back to the into the where Boavista used to be.
Looking at your journey in the space of what 20 years, you went from graphic designer to first team coach in the top league in Portugal. It's an
Yeah,
amazing
exactly.
journey.